Hi friends, I'm Les Mood, your host. Welcome to Green Tech Talks, an interview series with professionals and leaders that empower, inspire, and enroll. We're at InterSolar in Long Beach, and we're here with Julia Pyper, and we are bringing you a conversation brought to you by the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator Program. Welcome to the show, Julia.
Thank you, so great to be here.
So Julia, you've been in the industry a long time. Can you tell or share with our audience a little bit about yourself and maybe something that your colleagues don't know about you?
All right, a long time. Gosh, it's gone by quickly. You're aging me, Les. I've been now in this sector for over a decade. I started in journalism, which some people may or may not know, but what they may not know is that I'm Canadian. I grew up on a horse farm in Canada, and I actually think that informed a lot of my energy views. You know, you need resources and equipment on a farm. It's Canada, so it's cold. And I firmly believe we need to decarbonize, but I think I have a perspective now that we need a whole bunch of resources and a lot of dynamic solutions that fit all the use cases out there in the world, and it's both a super exciting time to think about what those solutions are and how to make them honestly work for everybody.
I didn't know you were from Canada, and I think I knew you loved horses, and that might explain your passion for the environment. So what are you up to these days, and what are you doing on a daily basis to advance, a better world?
Yeah, so I mentioned I started in the journalism sector. So I really believe that informing people of solutions is one of the key things we need to do in life. Of course, that's difficult sometimes. There's a lot of information. We live in a digital age where there's almost too much information. But of course, shows like yours are helping people, find find the information they need. So started covering the politics and policies of climate change early on, and evolved it now to being in the industry. So I now work on communications and policy for a company called GoodLeap. We are a marketplace, a digital marketplace that helps take the friction out of financing for sustainable home solutions.
Awesome. So what would you say in your long career, right? 10 years in this industry is a long time. What would you say are some of the challenges and some of the triumphs that you've seen or been a part of during that time?
Yeah, well, I think covering the policy sector, there's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back in that regard. I think everyone's always looking for policy consistency, and we're learning today in California at the federal level that even if you have the will and potentially a way, it's not as easy to get done as you might hope it to be. And I do think we need policy to support all the innovation in the private sector. We're here at InterSolar, and I think a major success is that so many companies exist with amazing new innovative solutions. So that is a major win. It's not a question of do we have the tools to solve climate change? We absolutely do. It's a matter of deploying them. Deploy, deploy, deploy. And that requires a system in which to do that and policies. But I think one of the biggest successes is having the financial community get on board. If you look at assessments from the financial sector itself, it's going to take $50 trillion globally to solve the climate crisis. That's a lot of money going to businesses, communities. Where's it going to go? How do we mobilize it? What will the institutions do to get those dollars out into the world? And I think now that they're on board is great, but we have a lot of work to do to figure out what's going to be most effective on that front.
Well, I really appreciate your answer about finance, because that's why I chose finance as my career. My first professor said, you should do finance. You got to pay for that stuff somehow. So I really appreciate that answer, and I agree with you totally. So what are some of the, from your time, what are some of the pieces of advice or some kind of wisdom you might leave with people from your experience?
So I started a podcast a few years ago called Political Climate, and the idea was to bring together a Democrat and Republican who work on energy and climate issues. There's no debate as to whether the issue is real, but there are very real debates on how to go about fixing it. And so I think one thing I learned was to not have any cherished outcomes and to understand that in energy, it's inherently complicated. Energy also affects human lives, and that's always something that's going to need community engagement and require a lot of diverse opinions. So it's kind of like science, like you need to test things over and over, except that your hypothesis may not have been quite right, and adjust. And so I think we're learning, when we look at the energy transition, just what kinds of technologies are needed, and it's probably a lot of them, from hydrogen to geothermal to solar to battery storage. What type of battery storage? And so I think having the ability to be flexible in our thinking and understand that we need different things at different times and not to just pick favorites because we like them is something I've learned in covering the energy transition. And now it's just about figuring out how to do it best and moving forward as one unit and one energy system.
So, Julie, where did your journey begin in the green tech industry?
It's kind of funny. I don't think I could say I was an environmentalist. I was kind of like a humanist. I really felt like I wanted to work in international development and things like that. And I learned pretty quickly that I'm from Canada. Who am I to say how people should evolve societies? But climate's one of those intersectional issues where you realize everyone has a role to play. And in fact, rich countries have an outsized role to play. And so I got really interested in figuring out what those solutions looked like in order to help people, because the planet will be fine, right? It's like what's going to happen to us that I think really matters. But in that same vein, I had a grandfather who was an engineer. He was very matter of fact. He was not political. He just read The Economist every day, and I remember him sending me emails about, for instance, the Canadian Coast Guard adding weapons to their icebreaker ships because they recognized the Arctic was melting and it was a geopolitical issue. And so he looked at the issue from that lens, and I thought that was both fascinating in terms of what it means for the future of, again, humanity and how we all live together, not just today, but for truly the future. And maybe a little hyperbolic, but kind of the future of our whole race.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, this recent movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, and what is it called? It's Don't Look Up, right? And I posted about it, had thousands of, it really got people talking, right? And it's an issue. It's like, how do we have these conversations and make things happen? So I really appreciate your people approach and your community approach, because like I said here on Green Tech Talks, it's the people and it's the communities that bring about the change and the innovation and make things happen that we wish to see. So that's the way to go. So that's what I want to do here with our audience. So Julia, you see so many stories, you cover so many stories, and there's so many ideas and so much information out there. What are some of the low-hanging fruit opportunities that professionals can bite into and really bring about some change?
Yeah, well, professionals or really anyone, I think, can look to, where they live, their home, where we spend most of our time, right? And if you look at research from Rewiring America, an organization here in the US, they calculate around 42% of emissions come from decisions made in the home. So that's what car you drive, how you cook your food, how you heat and get water heated up, as well as ambient air and everything. And so that's a lot of products that people already purchase every day, your HVAC, your car. And I think a thing people can do is look at what is a more sustainable option, right? So you can think about an EV, you can think about an electric HVAC system. It's an emerging space, as people we know in the sector are really on the front line of figuring out how to sell those products and bring the costs down. And so I recommend people looking at that. If you, again, look at the research, there's potential to save up to $2,500 a year on your home heating and cooling while reducing emissions, and something like 25 million new jobs that people calculate can come from just decarbonizing the home. And so I don't think individuals are responsible for solving climate change all on their own, but I think this is a fascinating area for innovation, for companies to grow, for entrepreneurs and installers and everyone to really play a part. So I'm super excited about the home, and I think it's a place that anyone can start.
I totally agree, and part of my words that I use to describe this is that it's kind of that bottom-up approach, and people can make a difference. They can do it in their home, and I really agree. And it's your home. You want it to be energy independent. You want to have clean energy. Why not, right? And if you can save money and make a difference in the world, how can you beat that? Well,
absolutely. And you also said bottom up and top down as well, right? So we talked about, so you said. Absolutely. You also mentioned, the bottom-up piece, and then there's the top-down piece that's also implied in that. And I do agree that we have to do both. Right. So top-down being policies, things like Washington State passing a cap-and-trade system, things like the state of Oregon, Illinois passing 100% clean energy laws, and even Nebraska passed a 100% clean energy law recently. So it's happening all across the country. Look to North Carolina in 2021, they passed a big energy bill. And so that's the kind of systematic change we need as well to complement what individuals are doing, so together we can decarbonize at the pace and scale that we need.
So Julia, what are some of the big areas, what are some of the big concerns and some of the issues that should not be ignored?
Well, there's a lot of them. As much progress as we're making, I think we're discovering new challenges as well. So one thing that comes to mind is making 100% clean energy work for 100% of people. We know for a fact that from historical practices of redlining and communities being located next to polluting power plants, for instance, there's been unequal access to not only clean technologies, but just healthy, livable air and water. And so we absolutely need to make sure that we're transitioning in a way that works for everybody. And that includes community engagement, new stakeholder processes to ensure everyone's at the negotiating table, because even traditionally, some people have been left out. So I think that's the thing that needs to be have a light shed on it. Also, that we are not done with fossil fuels by any means. We need to transition communities in a way that works for everybody. But just last year, 2021, we saw emissions spike again as the economy started to recover, which is great. But we also saw coal rebound, and that had to do with energy pricing. And so it's sort of surprising that this resource we thought was kind of on its way out was actually, still very much alive. Obviously not as much as in the past, but it just goes to show that we want to rebuild our economies, absolutely. This is our moment to do in a way that is truly decarbonized. So I think that's another challenge.
So Julie, one of the things I really appreciate about what you represent and how you share your dialogue is about communities. I'm really curious what you think communities can do and what role communities play in advancing energy, moving this forward.
Well, communities are the whole game, kind of, right? We talk about the United Nations climate summits, and we talk about national climate action, and even states, but those solutions ultimately get deployed in communities where people live and work. So I think we absolutely need to be thinking about stakeholder engagement and ways to get everyone's opinions, and locate projects in places where they're accepted and welcome, and give back to the community. And there's some new exciting business models around that with community ownership and things along those lines. So that's great, and job creation, of course, goes along with that. I think the one thing on the community side that I think is a challenge for the sector is NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And we've now seen that sort of start to inhibit some of the progress and pace of deployment of clean energy solutions. And that's one of those tricky issues, because you absolutely need communities to be on board with these things, and yet we will never meet our climate goals if there's constant delays and blockages. And sometimes there's other outside groups that get involved and add fuel to the fire on some of these local debates. So I don't have any solutions on that. I think it's something that has to be worked out, individual situation by individual situation. But it is certainly something that will impede our climate goals if we can't find better ways for community stakeholders to work together and get these projects ultimately deployed to decarbonize.
Would you say it would help if people who care about these things happening, not the NIMBYs, but the yes in my backyard people, would it help for them to get involved?
Absolutely, yeah. If you support these energy transitions, you must have your voice heard. That's how stakeholder processes work. That's how policy gets made. That's how leaders, what they respond to. So absolutely, people should have their voice be heard. And it's exciting. These are exciting things that are not going to derail our economy. I think historically, maybe we've not done the best job of painting a sustainable future as really just a better one. It's like, what if we just had healthier children, better water, cleaner air? Gosh, wouldn't that be terrible?
Oh my gosh,
right.
Don't sign me up for that.
Sure. And I'm being a little, I'm kidding a little bit, because there are some real challenges of where you would say locate a project that need to be considered. But absolutely, we need to be talking more about what this bright future looks like and how it can work for everybody, so that these decisions are easier to make and there is more widespread support, which ultimately there is. There's a lot of popular support for clean energy. Any poll you look at puts it 70, 80, 90% popularity across the board in political persuasion. And so it's just reminding ourselves of that and having the courage to come together, the patience to work together, and ultimately work faster to meet those climate goals that we just know we have to meet.
Speaking, you mentioned a brighter future, and what would you hope to see? And this is the thought experiment side of this question, is what would you hope to see happen as a result of your efforts or a community effort?
I'd love to see a world where the clean economy is not a term anymore, because it's just the economy. It's just so embedded in everything that we do. We've moved on from some of the historical debates to recognizing we need to find the best solutions from everything from, ways to even decarbonize our fossil fuel sector. Probably it's going to be around in some capacity for some time. So things like that, I think we need to lean into and move on from, and just have an economy that is clean embedded throughout. And that goes for even the clean energy sector, and having new innovations around recycling programs and designing technologies from the get-go for reuse at the end of the day, a truly circular economy. That would be my dream and my hope, and I hope we just get to a place where that is the economy.
I think your dream is shared. I think a lot of people agree with you, and I really appreciate your mentioning of the oil industry, and it's going to be around for a while. I'm from Bakersfield, right? I mean, it's a huge energy capital, but it's also the leader in renewable energy, in wind and in solar, and I don't know that many people necessarily know that, but energy is so powerful and useful to society. But we're going to need that oil for a while, right? So that's what I really wonder is, do you think a just and equitable energy transition can happen. It's what I call an energy transformation, and if so, how?
Oh gosh, I wish I had all the answers, Les. I mean, you mentioned a just and equitable transformation and oil communities as well. I think one thing that needs to happen is more information sharing among people in the sector who are in those jobs. Like, I think a lot of people come in at the 10,000 foot level and have thoughts on what the transition should look like, but we need to hear from people. For instance, if you live in West Virginia, you may have trouble selling your home. So say you wanted to change jobs and go work in clean tech. Can you sell your home in that location, which maybe has a less productive economy right now? I think there's other embedded issues in the energy transition that we have to start thinking about to really help people find those new jobs and hear what matters to them. And having other workers talk together. You mentioned Bakersfield. I think when people who used to work in the oil sector have now joined the solar sector, which I know has happened in that part of California a fair bit, having them talk to other people who are currently in the fossil fuel sector, talk about the job opportunities, that you will still have good benefits, things like that. I've seen those conversations happen, and that's the most kind of powerful conversation there can be. Nothing I say will really ever speak to someone who's really been doing the hard work of powering our economy. I have not done that. I've learned a lot about it, and I'm grateful to those individuals, and I think maybe those are some of the more important conversations we really need to be facilitating.
I really appreciate your perspective on a community level, and that everybody can get involved in. And speaking of community and what you do, how can people find you, and where are you at? Like, what's the best social media platform for people to find you and to find your content?
That's so awesome. Thanks for bringing that up. Of course, people can find Political Climate, the podcast that I host and produce on Canary Media, a fantastic news site, and a bunch of colleagues I used to work with for many years at the former Green Tech Media. So recommend everyone go sign up for their newsletter and check out Political Climate there. We're also on politicalclimatepodcast.com if you want to reach out and leave us a message, and on Twitter at POLI_climate, and my Twitter is JMPYPER, JM Pyper. So I love to hear from people, and honestly, tell me what I got wrong and what we should do better, and I learn from everyone else. So these kinds of conversations are just so important to me, and it's everything in how we get this right.
Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us on Green Tech Talks. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for just taking the time to be here at Intersolar to have this conversation. Like you said, it's the conversations that really need to be had, and it's the community that needs to be built to really make all of this happen. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Green Tech Talks, where we have conversations that empower, inspire, and enroll. Encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. This is brought to you by, just in case you didn't know, LinkedIn Creator Accelerator Program, where many of the most talented creators in the world are working to build community, and we're here to help you build green tech community. So join us, and we'll see you soon.